Okay, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Unlike a bathroom, a garage is a space we can all share. Some wants to park a car, and I need a workspace. You know that corner that's supposed to be the work area? Well, that's not enough. Sometimes I need the whole floor. So I was thinking I could build a workbench with a built-in light. One that fits the space, clean design, and motivates me. You know, so I can get a few things done. What you say? Alright, let's do this. First thing, I'm going to start off by marking the length of the 4 posts. With all the posts aligned with each other, I clamped all the parts so I can make one pass and cut them all at once. A circular saw is all you need, but personally I like to speed this up, so I'll switch over to the miter saw. Once I have the measurement set for the miter saw station, this will make things much easier to make repetitive cuts. To assemble the frame, I'm going to use pocket holes, and you'll need a pocket hole jig for this. An alternative to this is to use a dowel jig. Using dowels will give you a cleaner look and require less hardware. But on the downside, it requires more accuracy and could be a pain. So here I'll dab a bit of glue in between the joint as I start to assemble the frame for the workbench top. One challenge you may experience when using pocket hole screws is you could experience shifting. Whenever it's possible, I prefer to use clamps to hold the joints together as I screw the parts. Now I'll lay out 2 of the posts for the workbench and then place the frame that was just assembled on top of those. Now I'll use a cup of 2x4 to set the height of the frame. To connect the frame to the post, I'll drill a few pilot holes to prevent any splitting. Then I'll drive in the wood screws, but deep enough so I can add dowels to plug the holes after. As I'm making progress here, I just need to reposition this to add the other posts. Now I'll place a 2x4 in between the posts at the top. Then I'll secure it using pocket hole screws and repeat the same thing for the other side. Finally, I'll close the top end by securing 2x4s at both ends. I'll repeat the same thing at the bottom, closing it off as well. Now I need to build a frame at the bottom for lower storage. Even though the workbench is built within a frame, I still wanted the illusion that the top had a bit of an overhang to it. And to pull that off, I'll make the shelf more narrow than the top. Now after installing the side, it's time to put the front on. And 1 pocket hole screw is sufficient enough to hold this in place. To finish off the lower shelf, I created a build out on both ends of the bench. With the inside of that frame being so small, it made it a challenge to get a drill in there and drive pocket hole screws, so in this case I drove a few screws from behind. And while I'm at it, I figured this would be a good time to go ahead and get the casters on. This area here wasn't as even as I like it to be, so I needed to prepare it and clean it up so I can add the casters. Now I'll mark the mounting holes and drill those out. The casters I'm using come with its own nuts and bolt, but this application is quite different, so I'm going to switch those out for threaded inserts and also different threading screws. The biggest challenge here is trying to avoid the pocket hole screws within the frame so you don't hit them as you're drilling the holes. Right after, I'll install the casters using the appropriate screws and washers. Then I'll repeat the same thing until I get the remainder of the casters in place. All right, so that sums this up for now. We're gonna get this down and finish it up. Now that I have the workbench in its upright position, I'll add a support in the middle to strengthen the frame. It's probably a bit early to give this a strength test, but why not? 998, 99, 1000. That should do it. This is about when the project decided to go in a different direction from the original design. Originally, I was planning to put a piece of MDF at the bottom and call it a day. However, I decided to keep all the building materials in 2x4s so I can keep it quite simple and not have to switch different types of materials. After I cut down enough slats, I took those over to the pocket hole jig and started to create pocket holes in all of those. I ended up drilling 3 holes in each slats, 2 on each side and 1 on the other. This way I'm using the minimum hardware without having these slats spin. I'm gonna go ahead and sand these parts down, get them prepped and ready so I can paint them. While I'm at it, I'll also prepare the workbench. The screws I used created a perfect hole to accept a 5/16 wooden dowel. Once I drive those in, I can simply cut them off. The pocket hole accepted a slightly larger 3/8 dowel. With the same concept in mind, drive it into the hole and use a flush cut saw to cut it off. You can leave these a little proud of the surface and then use a sander to sand it down to the surface. Another option to cover up the pocket holes is using these plastic caps. I ended up using a few of these at the end because I ended up short with the 3/8 dowel I had on hand. Now it's a matter of sanding this down with 120 grit sandpaper and following that up with 220. I'm using a foam roller here, which gives off a pretty good end result, and I prefer to go this route over using a brush because I've only need to put on 1 coat with the foam roller. So far it's been working out, so I'll just keep at it. After painting all of the slats, I then move my focus over to painting the workbench. As I mentioned earlier, I veered away from the original design because this bottom area should have been filled in using a piece of MDF, but since I switched over to incorporating slats, I'm going to space these accordingly until I can fill the space out perfectly. Once I got to the end, I did have to rip the final 2 slats to keep a consistent look. And also to address this bumped out area here, I'm going to install a couple pieces of 2x4 by aligning them with the pieces in the back and securing them from underneath. Now I need to build a frame to house the lighting panel that's planned to be installed in here. The fixture I plan to use in here is being reused from the shop. I believe these lights are discontinued. I did find a comparable fixture. While this is not the same, it has a lower profile and it's also lighter. What I like about this fixture is there are LED strips involved rather than bulbs. With this, I don't have to be too concerned about popping a bulb while hammering on the workbench. With the electrical fixture installed and secured, I'll go ahead and wire up the circuit. And to keep a firm grip on the Romex wire, I added a clamp connector. I need to make up a junction point so I can house the switch and also a outlet. Since I'm using a metal box here, I need to remove a few of the knockouts and install a couple clamp connectors. Now I need to pick a spot and frame it so I can install the junction box. With the junction box installed, now I can route the electrical wire from the light fixture through the clamp connector. I also found this tool replacement plug to use as the power cord for this workbench. I'll route this inside the box, lock it down, and also strap it so it won't get pulled away. I removed the jacket from the electrical wires and then wired up the circuit. So instead of covering this and then coming back to this later in the video because I added an additional wire here, I didn't want to make it too confusing, so I'd rather not spend the time going over each and every connection I'm making, but I will have it clarified within the plans. But in simple form, I added an outlet here, I also added a power switch, and I tapped off of this connection to create another outlet on the opposite side. So I had this idea to add a fan to the workbench so you can blow some cool air as you're working. The idea here was to add a few pieces of wood to hang the fan. Well, after adding 3 of these pieces, I started liking the direction and figured I should continue. But first, let's get this fan mounted to make sure that I like the direction. I drilled a hole through the parts, and then I'll use a knob and also a threaded insert. I'll use that knob to drive that threaded insert in place. This way I have threads to drive in a screw and allowed me to loosen and tighten the fan. So I picked up this small fan that I felt blowed pretty strong, and once you drill a hole in it, there's no returning it now. It's all yours. At this stage, I'm veering away from the original design and I'm just working on some add-ons right now. So I had an outlet right up here in this space, but I took it out so I could finish this off. Right now I'm using a T-slot screw to insert into that threaded insert that was inserted previously, and any screw could work here, it just happened to be what I have on hand. The knob I had was a bit too bulky and I needed to go for something a bit smaller. If you have trouble finding a knob, you can possibly use a wing nut and it'll give you the same operation. With the way this is attached right now, I'm able to swivel this and also tilt the fan up and down. I need to find a spot to pass the power cord, and I need to make sure that this doesn't interfere with where the power cord hole is, so this seemed to be the best location. The receptacle I removed earlier will now be installed on top of the workbench. Mounting this over here gives me an additional outlet here so I can plug the fan directly into this and not utilize one of the existing outlets on the other side. This will just sit up here and I think it'll be perfectly fine the way it is. I will also add an additional strap over here so this doesn't stick up too much. At this point, I'm gonna route this wire into this electrical box, and if you know electrical work, then you know exactly what I'm going to do next. If you don't, I'll make sure to put this in the plan so you guys have a clear and detailed instructions on that. I'm gonna take care of this and we're gonna put the top on, and I think for now, I'm not gonna call it done yet, but we're gonna put the top on. This will be the main junction where I have everything tied in and distributed from this area, so once I get it all closed up, I'll snap the plate back on and that will do it. So at this point, I'm in a different garage. I've relocated the workbench over here. I'm going to put the top on, and I wanted to do it as I get to this location. Although you can build a top for this, you can go a number of ways with that. You can go plywood, MDF, or even a 2x4 laminated top. So as we stand right now, I believe I have $112 in lumber to build the entire frame of this workbench. And again, as I said, you can build any top to go on top of this workbench, but I'm gonna be using a pre-made top from Husky. You can find those on their workbenches already, but I found out that you can also purchase the top separately. So this top measure at 24 by 72, and it fits right in here. So if I get my finger out, perfect fit. I'm gonna use 8 of these. So what I'll try to do is utilize some of the existing holes that's already threaded in the workbench, and wherever I can't, I'll just screw a couple of these right into the workbench and just call that done. And to wrap this one up, I found a stool that blends right into the space, quickly assembled it, and it was ready to go. This will be the home of the workbench, perfect spot where I can come to it, do some work on it, and pull it out if needed. Having this workbench allowed me to keep a clean look, but it's also motivating to come to the space and do some work. Incorporating a light and outlet really completes this workbench. The fan tops it off, and it's a well-needed addition. Be sure to check out the video description for links, plans, and a written version to this on DIYcreators.com. If you're using this as a multi-purpose workbench, one way to preserve the nice top on here is just throwing on a sheet of plywood and continue your work. You can clamp tools on the side of the workbench, and you can hammer on it. I was a bit worried about the rattling of the light fixture, but that didn't seem to be an issue. There are so many add-ons I can add to this workbench. If there's something you'd like to see me add to it, let me know down in the comments. Also, let me know what you like about it and didn't like about it. Until next time.